take another question,
He
ma'am.
responded
Here.
to the question I asked. And then you intervene and say, let's move on, let's not argue, but he's making factual misstatements.
And no one in their right mind would ever put a manufacturing or office building up land, because anybody that knows 15 Mile Hills know that it's unbuildable land.
Okay, we have another question right here.
Hey, Chris, I appreciate everything you're going to try to do, but with a $73 billion unfunded pension liability and Democrats in control and their constituents that are the beneficiaries of the $73 billion, how are you going to possibly be able to afford to cut taxes?
Well, let's talk about pensions for just a moment. I am not an expert on the state pensions. However, one of my good friends is Sandy Rosenberg, who is a longtime Democratic delegate. I went to Williams College, he went to Amherst, so we're friendly opponents, if you will, because those two colleges are they always play each other, and whoever wins the year. So Sandy came up to me and he said, Chris, if you get elected, we need to work together on fixing the state pension problem. And he reminded me that a mutual friend who we have in common is the person in charge over in Washington in Obama's administration on pensions. This guy used to be an attorney with Covington and Burling. His whole career has been devoted to pensions. He was a classmate of mine in high school and a very good friend of Sandy's. So he said, let's get Mark to come over and sit down with us, and the three of us put our heads together and try to work out something to solve on a long-term basis. We can't do it overnight. On a long-term basis, the state's unfunded pension liability, which is massive. We're talking $20 billion of unfunded pension liability. It's not quite, but it's 19.7 or so billion dollars of unfunded pension liability that we simply have to take care of. So if I get elected, one of the first calls I'm going to make is to Sandy, and I'm going to say, let's get Mark and let's sit down and start to talk about this. Next question back here. Yeah.
Yes, sir. I don't know if you remember, I was a classmate of yours at Williams 40 years ago, and I can.
Your face.
Yeah, well, I'm a little aged a little bit.
Who are you?
Yeah, no, don't.
I'll see you afterwards.
And I share your views about Amherst, incidentally.
Yeah. Are you Dudley? No, you're not Dudley Staples.
No.
Okay.
But I can say I remember you from Williams, and I know that you are outspoken and honest and civic-minded, and I'm glad to be in a position to be able to, without having kept in touch with you over these years, support you today. I am concerned, though, with Councilman Huff, and I've lived in this area for 3 decades now, and one of the attributes of Councilman McIntyre was his complete and total responsiveness to the people.
Community association.
Pardon?
The community association.
And if you've been here a long time, you're at the community association.
So, in any event, the woman over here talked about the 1,100 signatures for the FILA thing. That is a deep concern. I know that the people in Thornton Mill were quite unhappy and feel as though the zoning, upzoning there was a betrayal of campaign promises. I know that the people in Mays Chapel organized extensively in order to try to oppose the elimination of the park and the creation of the school there. I also know that the Sparks Glencoe Community Association does not support, like you said a few minutes ago, does not support the FILA development. That was a mistake. They do not support that.
No.
He's in the room.
So,
You read the last
yeah, well,
article.
yeah. So in any event, I guess what I'm concerned about is this, particularly where zoning is the one thing where a councilman has virtually unbridled discretion.
Right.
And where Councilman McIntyre was very responsive to people.
Very much abused.
Abused.
Took our property.
Okay. Reason why we differ about some of these things. My point is not so much what's right, what's wrong, what's here, what's now. My point is the necessity and the disappointment, I think, honestly, that many of us feel because we don't feel like you are responsive to people, to people that actually live here. We feel like you're responsive more to the moneyed, to the developers, to the people who profit from these things, as opposed to us who simply live here and try
Are you asking
and
a
live our lives.
question?
Let's
So
let
my
the
question
councilman
is,
respond.
what is your view about how it is you should respond to the people?
Well, I would venture to say that there's probably 3/4 of the people in this room that would actually disagree with you and agree with my stances on people's property rights.
Yes.
Things were, when you have an organization that publicly states that they don't want one more house built, period, in northern Baltimore County,
Oh, that's just not true. That's an exaggeration, really. That's hyperbole.
that was in their annual meeting 2 years ago.
Uh,
That's where it gets unrealistic. To answer your question about Mays Chapel, there are press releases out there, Huff against Mays Chapel School. I fought against Mays Chapel School. I still fight against Mays Chapel School. The only reason for the land swap, and I'll say it again, over and over again, Baltimore County Public Schools was building the school on the park. You would not have had a park there, period. The majority down there wanted the park, which is the seniors, and the 4 towers of seniors. The only way to save the park was to do the land swap. My colleagues and I rolled over this, but we could not get them to come off of building the school there, period. We were all in agreement on the fact that they needed to do the additions to the schools, because I had also made it public that the fact that the down the road issue, which I am dealing with right now, is the redistricting. And the people that were in support of the school didn't comprehend on how impactful redistricting would be. And they're seeing it now. It's literally dividing neighborhoods down in Timonium, Lutherville, and Riderwood. So it was publicly stated, it is in press releases, that I fought against that school from day one.
Thank you. Yes, right here.
My question is also for Huff, though the other incumbent can answer as well. When you listed all your accomplishments, they were a laundry list of ways that you had spent our money. My question is, what can you do to allow us to keep more of our money instead of spending it? Is there a way that you can reduce what's taken out of our pockets, or are you just spending our money? I mean, these are very large numbers, and I'm not used to dealing with those kinds of large numbers, but is there a way that we can reduce the amount that we're actually spending?
Let's let David go first, because he's been silent for a while.
It's a great question. I think the government's role is to address core concerns, core priorities. I believe in what Ronald Reagan believed, which is we should have strong local governments, and we should have state and federal governments which are doing less. In other words, this is the level of government should be closest to the people. We should be focusing on public safety, infrastructure, schools, things like that. And we should be laying the foundation for growth. In terms, I would hope that in the next term we might have a property tax cut. I think that's something we should be aiming for. As a council member, and Councilman Huff has supported me with this, we've looked for ways to cut spending. Let me give you a good example. When we came into office, we looked at the budget and we found out that the county was sending tens of thousands of dollars to city museums and institutions. At the same time, we were cutting back from the Maryland Food Bank. I authored an amendment that cut some of that spending, cut the spending we were sending to the Clay Museum, for example, in Baltimore City, got the administration to agree to increase the funding for the Maryland Food Bank. And we're regularly looking for ways to cut spending. I have also looked for ways to partner with the private sector to get things done. In the Lock Raven Boulevard corridor, for example, you may recall the Hess gas station situation where there was contaminated land. Hess Corporation, as part of a settlement with those property owners, purchased 16 homes. We were able to get the environmental regulators to agree that that property was not contaminated, and we're now making a public park there. We worked to secure funding through private sources to build a playground in Perry Hall, to advance a dog park. These are the type of creative solutions that you look to county leaders to do. I think Councilman Huff has also tried to explore some imaginative ways we can address concerns and improve our communities. So the answer to your question is we need to grow the economy, we need to grow our tax base, we need to aim for a property tax cut if we can do it in the next term. And those of us in public service should be looking to make government more efficient and to get things done in creative, imaginative ways.
Yes, new question.
I have a question for Councilman Marks. Could you explain a little more in detail about the budget approval process, in as much that Baltimore County Public Schools is going to be coming and asking for, I believe it's $1.4 billion. How finally are those numbers looked over in terms of what they're going for, and in the past, did money that was approved for certain subjects, was it actually spent in that fashion? And so what control do you have from the budget process to understand and make sure that what's targeted for certain aspects of education actually occurs?
It's a great question. We received the budget in April from the county executive. Although before that, 2 months before, we get the submission that the superintendent makes to the school board that then comes to the county executive. So we do have an opportunity to go through that with a fine-tooth comb. I will tell you that, quite frankly, I wish our auditing functions were a lot better. I wish there was more scrutiny of this process. I think the school board reform effort is going to help with that. I have been a strong supporter of the school board reform effort for many years. In my opinion, we should have a localized school board selection process, and we should have folks who are elected by the voters of Baltimore County. And I think you're going to see, as that process unfolds, much greater scrutiny of how we spend our money. Elected school board, however, is not a panacea. Keep that in mind. It's not going to solve all our problems, but I think it's going to bring a greater openness and transparency to the way the school board functions. I have a situation going on in my district in the Loch Raven Boulevard corridor, many of you may have heard of, in which the superintendent wants to reopen Loch Raven Elementary School, take the entire population of Halstead Academy and move it over to Loch Raven Elementary School. I have had my planning board member ask pointed questions of Dr. Dance during the planning board process. In fact, he grilled him for over a half hour on that proposal. And I think that was very instructive, and I think it sent a message that we're looking at that budget a lot more closely.
Yes, way back here.
I have a question for David. While the growth in Towson is exciting, what's being done about the crime in Towson?
Great question. That is a fantastic question. First of all, if you look at the statistics, the crime in Towson is, I think there's a perception that it's just skyrocketing, when in fact, on a historical level, it is not. Unfortunately, with online publications and there is sometimes a perception that crime is out of control. Perception to a lot of people, however, is reality. And those of us in government need to make sure that our communities feel as safe as possible. I'll tell you what I've done. I've worked with the county executive to try to get increased numbers in our Towson precinct. I think we're going to have more police officers on the beat, particularly before the Towson Square development opens, which is the restaurants.
Will they be county police officers state, or are they going to be?
County. They'll be county. So number one is increase the presence for our Towson precinct. There's no substitute for good police officers. Second thing I've done is work to expand our Citizen on Patrol program throughout Greater Towson. Towson has probably the most advanced COP program in Baltimore County. These are volunteers that provide eyes and ears for our police force. Third thing we've done is we are looking at specific parts of Towson where there are lighting deficiencies, where students in particular may feel unsafe. I created a task force that is looking at lighting along Burke Avenue at Burke and York. The administration has also been improving lighting along York Road and on some of the side streets like Pennsylvania and Allegheny. Also, the county executive passed legislation recently that bans cell phone recycling kiosks in Baltimore County, and also better regulates the recycling of small electronics like cell phones and iPads. So hopefully that will reduce the incidence of crime throughout Towson. I think all of those things are helping. We always can do more, but I think you need to have partnerships between the police, neighborhoods, the county's council, the county executive, Towson University, and the neighborhoods to address the problem. The final thing we need to do